Hey guys, I've been out all day but just come home, obviously seeing the news that Fernando has been officially announced at Renault. That news is now out there for 2021 and 2022. That's the initial term of the contract, 2 years. So I wanted to give my quick thoughts on it, and I hope it is going to be quick. First thought is that clearly 2021 in a Renault car, despite who's driving it, is still going to be a bit of a struggle. There are some really strict restrictions in place in terms of development, a token system that only allows very limited scope to develop the technology that you have both in the power unit and in the car. So they're not going to be able to develop their way all the way up the grid. They may be able to make progress, but they're certainly not going to be challenging for world titles. So why is Fernando coming back if he can't be in a car capable of challenging for a world title? Well, surely then it's all about 2022, when the new set of regulations, this whole new revolution that's coming to Formula One, offers up a set of opportunities for not just the current incumbents at the very top of the sport, but perhaps anybody who can do a better job than some of the others with this whole sweeping set of changes on a restricted budget, as it will be even more so by then. So it's all about 2022. Can Fernando challenge for a world title in 22? Who knows is the answer to that. My feeling is that Renault are still so far behind the rest that it would take something extraordinary to suddenly catapult them right to the very front. But it is a sweeping set of changes and therefore a sweeping set of opportunities that come with that. Who's it a good move for? Who's it a bad move for? Let's look at Fernando first of all. If he can't challenge for a world title, and if he's going to be struggling around the midfield, potentially even the back end of the midfield next year, it's going to be a frustrating season for him. I'm sure he will come in feeling hugely relaxed, feeling like he's not under pressure to deliver extraordinary results, not expecting to be winning races, and therefore, like he did at various times at McLaren, he'll be able to go through that season kind of laughing off the failures, laughing off the poor results, and just talking about his own personal progression back into the sport. Is it a good move for Renault? Well, if you think about it on a PR sense, it's a huge move. If you think about the Renault brand, it's a fantastic opportunity for them to market off the back of having a huge name like Fernando Alonso coming back into the sport with them. It shows a huge amount of commitment because they will be paying him a significant amount of money, and it also shows a commitment beyond the end of 2021, in fact beyond the end of 2020, which at this point no one really quite knew, despite the things they were saying, which was going to be there, whether it was going to be there or not. So I guess we can safely say that we can expect Renault to hang around until at least 2022, and if they're committing to the new set of regulations, probably long beyond that as well, which is good news for the sport, good news for everybody at Renault. I'm sure Fernando will galvanise a team in that commitment I just talked about will filter its way through the organisation and give people working at Renault a sense of commitment themselves, knowing that the people that are employing them are committed for the medium to long term. What about the negatives though? Because I think there are some. My first thought when I heard this was that this is going to be a negative for Esteban Ocon. Not because he may potentially end up getting beaten by Fernando. I don't actually know whether that'll happen or not. Who knows? We've got to see how Ocon can deal with Daniel Ricciardo in the first place. That's his first challenge. So on the racetrack, he's clearly got a challenge that he's got to overcome, the challenge of Daniel, and then he takes on a two-time world champion of Fernando Alonso. But for me, the bigger negative for Esteban Ocon is what Fernando does to a team. You can already see the excitement around Fernando joining from Renault, the importance they'll be placing on him. He will know that. He absolutely demands that level of performance. It doesn't have to be written into his contract, but it doesn't take very long for him to start pulling in people all around that factory, all around that organisation to get him the opportunities that he feels he deserves and needs whilst he's at the team. And unfortunately, the other driver in a team with Fernando can often feel somewhat isolated, somewhat second best. I can see that this move from Fernando joining could be the beginning of the end for Esteban Ocon, certainly at Renault. Whether he can escape and go somewhere else and build a sensible career, we'll have to wait and see. But for me, I think that's the thing. There's a huge negative around Fernando. I have huge respect for him as a driver. I lost a huge chunk of that respect through the Spygate saga Crashgate back in Singapore, because I don't think there's any place for that in sport. That was going to a level that's way beyond any other form of pushing the rules, bending the rules. It was outright race fixing, it was cheating. And Fernando, whatever you read or whatever he says, clearly was involved at some level in all of that. So I lost a lot of respect for that. However, he also commands a lot of respect because of the type of driver that he is. I've worked with him, of course, at McLaren the first time around, and you've got to be in awe of what he can do in a car. It's just that that's been overshadowed so many times by what he does out of the car. And that's what's going to be really interesting. That, I think, is what a lot of people are going to be following, perhaps more than the on-track antics that are going on, particularly through 2021, where Renault could be relatively anonymous. But what will be going on outside of that car, in the garage, in the factory, around the group that Fernando will start to build? I think that's going to be one of the most interesting dynamics to follow, and how the people that are already there are affected by that. Will they be positively affected? Will they be negatively affected? Will there be a big split down the middle of the garage like we saw at McLaren back in 2007? It's a really interesting saga. I think it's great for Formula One that we've got people talking about Fernando coming back. He's a great name. But I do think there's still an awful lot of question marks about what might come from it, what Fernando's motivations are for it, and how long will he remain motivated if he can't get a car out of Renault that will offer him the opportunity to challenge at the very front. Is this being seen by him as just a stepping stone to find his way back into the sport and then put himself on a platform where other teams, the Mercedes of this world, may start to look at him again and say, maybe he's worth another shot? We will have to wait and see, but there's my 2 pennies worth. I'd love to know what you think. Good move, bad move, controversial move? Would you have preferred to see one of Renault's young drivers be promoted and put into that seat next year? There's a very good argument for that. They have an academy. What's the point of it if you're not going to use them? Or is Fernando just too big a name to turn away? I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll be back very soon. Ta-da.